Hi and welcome to another very exciting tutorial. Today we're going to delve right into the new SwiftUI, which is amazing and really revolutionizing the way we're going to create user interfaces in Xcode. It is totally fun. It is really easy to use, and we're going to have a look at how you can actually build something very quickly with the new SwiftUI. We're going to create this very simple application that you're seeing here on the right. We can just transition between the detail view that we have here, just showing us an image of our developer. All of these developers have cool code names like 1, 2, 3, and 4. And as you can see, this is what we would have called a navigation controller, and we had a table view, and we would have created a segue to transition between those different view controllers, but everything is a little different with SwiftUI, and I'm going to show you how this works right now. So for that, I'm going to create a new project, and as you can see here from my desktop background, I am running the new macOS Catalina here, and this is also mandatory if you want to actually create things with the new SwiftUI and see the live updates. So this will only work if you're running Xcode 11 on the new macOS beta at the moment. And what I'd like to do here is now creating a very simple single view application, giving it the name. Let's also call it Simple App. And the most important thing for us now is to actually check Use SwiftUI. If you don't set this checkmark or activate this checkbox, then everything is going to work as you know it. But if you activate this checkbox, Use SwiftUI, then everything is going to be a little different. And once our project is created, this is what you're going to see. And the purpose of this tutorial really is to give you a feeling for how SwiftUI really works. So I'm going to do a bunch of things, and later I'm going to go into more detail so that you also understand the background. But I really want you to see something before I go into the technical details. So once I hit resume here, what I get is a preview of what my view is going to look like. And the cool thing is that as soon as I update something here, for example, enter Swift, this change is also made here in on my canvas. And I just want to add some other UI elements here as well. For example, a second text. So I can press Command-Shift-L on the keyboard or click on my plus icon in the top right corner and add yet another text right here on top or below my already existing one. Let's maybe choose below. And as you can see, in our code view, in the code editor, we got a vertical stack that helps us deal with our interface. And if I want to make another change here, for example, to our placeholder, I can click it and still get my attributes inspector here on the right. I can still choose between all these inspectors, and I may want to add here another great developer. And what I can also do is change my Hello Swift here a little bit. For example, I want this to have a larger font. But in addition to actually doing that in the attributes inspector, for example, if it's not open at the moment, I can also press Command on the keyboard, click on my element, hit inspect, and make some modifications right here. For example, change the font to title. All right, so this already is pretty nice, but I actually want this Hello Swift to be aligned with another great developer. So the cool thing about these stacks is that I can just say and initialize the stack with an alignment and say that I want this to have a leading alignment. And if I resume, then my text is already nicely aligned. So next, I might want to add a picture of my developer. So again, pressing Command-Shift-L on the keyboard, searching for image, and dragging that to the left. And I make sure that it's not indicating that I'm adding it at the top or on top, but on the left. And now I actually need an image. So let's add some images to our assets folder. I have downloaded a few dummy pictures, adding them right here, and I've named them according to the code names of our cool developers 1, 2, 3, and 4. And what I want to do here now is just enter the name of the picture as a string, hit resume, and as you can see, now we also have this cool image. But SwiftUI is really awesome, and there are some things that would have taken a bit more work to do, but let me show you just something very cool. So what if I actually wanted this image to be masked, to give it a circular shape or a rounded rect? So what I can do here is just call the clip shape function and then choose a shape like a circle. And we immediately have masked our image. I could also, for example, choose rounded rectangle, define a corner radius, and then we have a image with a rounded rectangle. And this is just pretty easy, pretty simple, and so cool. Just making this a little larger here, but I think I'm just going to go with the circular shape. And since I don't want my row to be centered like this, I have to add some space between the end of this vertical stack and the rest of my screen here, and therefore I can just use a very simple spacer object, and as you can see, this fills the gap between this text element and the rest of my screen. But now the problem is that this kind of seems glued to the left edge, so I need to give this some room here, and this is also very simple. I can just use my horizontal stack and add a little bit of padding here, and then we have some nice breathing room here for our row. And since this is actually a row, why not take all of this and just cut it out and put it into its own file? So here we're just going to add a bit of text so that everyone is content here. And I'm going to create just a new file for my row. So pressing Command N on the keyboard. And now here in my template chooser, I have a new element in the user interface section, which is called SwiftUI view. And here I'm going to just call this maybe content row, hit create, and I still have my code in my pasteboard, so I'm going to add that in a second. But let me just quickly go through what we're having here. And this is actually pretty much the same as we have in our content view. So let's go back to content row. As you can see, we have a struct that is called content row, and it adopts the view protocol. And this protocol requires us to create a body property. And within this property, we are always defining our user interface that we'd like to see. So if I hit resume here, I get my preview. But this code is not really responsible for actually displaying all of that right here on our canvas. But this code, this struct really is, and it uses this directive here to actually make sure that it is only part of our development and debug time, or during our debug time, and when we're creating our application in Xcode, so it's not going to be shipped with your application. And here we having this other struct, content row previews, that adopts the preview provider. And here we actually can initialize the struct that represents our user interface, in that case, our content row. So this is what we're doing right here. And if we're looking at that from a UI kit kind of perspective, from the UI kit point of view, then there also needs to be kind of an entry point, an initial view controller or an initial view. And this is actually specified in the scene delegate. So here in the scene delegate, we have this function called scene will connect to session. And here in this function, there is a window, UI window defined that has a root view controller, and we're initializing that with a UI hosting controller that has a root view. And the root view is actually, in our case, the content view, could also be the content row. So here you're going to define what you're seeing as a first view. But now we really want to have our list or our table view and fill it with some data. And therefore, I'm going to create a very, very simple data model using just a Swift file. And I'm going to call that maybe just data, very simple. And I'm for now going to just import foundation, create a very simple struct, call it developer. And this is going to get an ID, which is going to be an integer, and a code name, which is going to be a string. And then I'm also going to create an array here for developers. And now I'm going to create just some developer objects with an ID starting with 101 and a code name of 1. I'm just going to copy that real quick. All right, now we have some data that we can work with. And we actually want to define our list now in our content view. And it is actually as simple as just defining a list. And by initializing this list, what we can do is just pass along the data that we'd like to use. In our case, we have the array of developer objects that we've created in our data file. So I'm just using my developers as a data provider for my list and append a closure here. And what I can have in my closure is a developer object that I can now use to create a content row and initialize this content row. Now, it would be cool if we could actually just have our content or our code name here in our content row so that we could fill our row with some data. So what I'm going to do is just create a property here in my content row and call that code name, which is going to be a string, and we're going to use that for our first text here to pass along the code name of our developer. I'm just going to use string interpolation here to add my code name to this string, and I'm also going to use that code name for my image. And as you can see, we now also have to change the initializer of our content row for the preview. So I'm just going to just rewrite that here and initialize that here just with 1 to begin with. And as you can see, when we're having a look at that in or on our canvas, then we actually have an error here at the moment because we still need to do something here. Let me just quickly add a text here. Don't worry about that. I'm going to change that in a second. But I actually want to have a look at the content row. And as you can see, we have our code name 1 now added. We initialize that here in our preview provider or with our preview provider and can see that this works still fine. Now back to our list. And to what we have just created here. We just initialized our content row and it didn't really work. And we need to specify our argument here, of course. So I'm just passing along developer and the code name. But still, it is not going to work because we cannot process our developers yet. Therefore, we have to go back to our data struct and actually make this developer struct identifiable. And this only works if we're importing SwiftUI here. As soon as we do that, we can make or adopt the identifiable protocol here for our developer struct. And this actually makes it possible to work with this ID that we have created. And it's also required to have such an ID property in an identifiable struct that can work with our list. Once we build that, we're actually good to go, and we can have a look at this in our on our canvas here on the right, and we already have now our list with the different elements. So cool and so easy. Just actually a table view. Now we're calling it a list. Now, we actually want to move between a detail view and this list view, and therefore we're just going to create yet another view as a file. So I'm just selecting my content row, pressing Command N here on my keyboard, creating a new SwiftUI file, and this one I'm going to call content detail. And for the content detail, since we also want to initialize that with a code name, I'm going to create a property for the code name, which is going to be a string. And then we're going to make this very simple. We're going to also initialize that here with our code name, just giving this 1 again. Then we can resume. And we're designing our UI real quickly, pressing Command-Shift-L on the keyboard, adding an image here right above our hello world. At the moment, the image is going to be the code name. We're also going to give this a circular shape. So let's say clip shape here as well. And we want this to be a circle. So that is also done. And for the text here, this should be developer and its code name, adding a colon here and the code name. And then we also want this to give this a title font, just that it's a little bit larger. This is going to be our very, very simple detail view, and that we can now use in our content view itself together with our list. Now, using UIKit, we would have to create a segue between two view controllers. With SwiftUI, this is a lot simpler. All we have to do is create a navigation button. And the navigation button requires us to specify a destination. And this destination is going to be our detail view, so content detail in our case, and then we can just initialize that with a code name, which is going to be developer, and the code name that is a property of the developer. And now we have a navigation button, and the navigation button receives as a closure what it should display, and this would be our content row. So I'm just cutting this from our list and pasting that right into our navigation button. And as you can see, now we have these little arrow indicators. And now for all of this to work, we're going to put our complete list into a navigation view. So I'm just creating a navigation view. And inside this navigation view, I'm just pasting my list and the rest of our elements. And once I did that and resume my project, I'm going to be able to just press on a cell here or on a row. We can transition between those different views, and we're always updating to the correct data that we have specified. So this is already pretty cool. Now let's give it a also a cool look by adding a navigation bar, for example. So we have our list here. This list is going to get a navigation bar title, which is going to be a text. In our case, let's say developers. And what I also like to have is, of course, a display mode. I could specify, for example, inline, or in our case, I'm just going with large. And then I'm going to copy this navigation bar title, go back to my content details, and here for the stack, I'm giving it a navigation bar title. This title is going to be the code name, and this time we're going to go with the inline version of the whole thing. So let's now have a look at our content view, and let's just press on one of the buttons or on the roads, and there we have it. We can press on an element, we get our navigation bar, we can transition back, And all of that with really just a few lines of code. I really love the new SwiftUI. I think it is going to revolutionize the way we're creating user interfaces. And please let me know what you think about SwiftUI. And also, what are your favorite WWDC announcements and new features for iOS and Mac OS? Subscribe to this channel to not miss any tutorials that are coming this week and next week to stay up to date and to learn more about the newest features that are coming this year. I thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!